Intelligent man, inside. And what we say a man knows is what he discovers or unveils. Honorable dignitaries on the dais, honorable members of management of MLNGE Society, teachers and my dear friends. I, Neha Kamble, welcome, organized by Manikchand Pahade Law College to help us discover the knowledge of our Constitution of India. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil back. But Gandalf said, I have found that it is the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. It is the hunger in our souls that keeps darkness away. On this note, let's begin this event with the traditional lamp lighting ceremony and evoke Ma Saraswati. Thank you, sir. To introduce to us Professor
Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi National Law University of National Law University, Punjab. Sir has completed BSc, BL, LLB, LLM, PhD and PDF from London. Sir is gold medalist in BL and LLM. Jaswal sir is an academician per excellence with a vast and rich experience of 33 years in the field of teaching and research with 3 decades of experience and has to his 65 research papers published in various reputed national as well as international journals and books. Sir has presented a multitude of research papers in numerous seminars and conferences and also guiding and supervising LLM as well as PhD students. He has expertise in the field of constitutional law, administrative law, human rights and environmental law. Till the date, Sir has published his 11 books on vital legal topics such as directive principles, jurisprudence, socio-economic justice in India, and human rights, etc. Also published some selected essays on criminal law. The book on environmental law, 2nd edition 2003, is widely acclaimed in the legal field and has been cited thrice by Honorable Supreme Court of India in landmark judgment reported as In Re Noise Pollution 2005, Volume 5, Supreme Court Cases 733. Honorable Sir is a recipient of numerous fellowship, awards and scholarships. Sir was awarded with Nehru Centenary British Fellowship Award for the year 1991 to 1992 for doing postdoctoral research in the Department of Law, School of Oriental and African Studies of University of London. Sir has also awarded with the Career Award in 1994 for Young Talented Teachers by UGC and Bharat Jyoti Award in 2006. Sir has been a recipient of university, state government, national and UGC scholarships at different levels of studies. He has completed a course of human rights at the International Institute of Human Rights, Strasbourg in France, and also undergone an intensive training in International Center for University Human Rights Teaching, as well as internship at the UN for Human Rights at Geneva. He is an keen able administrator and has handled various positions of responsibility. He has been chairman of Department of Law, Punjab University, Chandigarh, former director of University Institute of Legal Studies, Chandigarh during 2008-2009, director principal of Rayat College of Law, Navansar district of Punjab for 3 years, 2005 to 2008. Sir has also served as Punjab University Council from 1997 to 2005. Sir was the chief editor of Punjab University of Law Review, Chandigarh, and former chief editor of Journal of University Institute of Legal Studies, Punjab Universities. He was also the member of various bodies like State Legal Services Authorities, Chandigarh, Advisory Committees of Regional Correctional Institute, Chandigarh, National Advisory Committee on Legal Changes for Conclusive Titling in India, Academic Council, Nalsar, Hyderabad, Academic Council and Doctoral Committee of National Law University, Delhi, and member of various academic and administrative bodies of Punjab universities and various different other universities. After serving as a Vice Chancellor at Hidayatullah National Law University, Sir joined as a Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi National Law University, Punjab at Patiala in February 2011. I welcome Sir on behalf of my college. Thank you.
Amongst us, such a multidimensional personality. I now request Advocate Shri R.D. Deshpande Sir, President of MLNGE Society and President for today's... political tradition, which we in the West call Western, but which is now something more than Western. That is the supremacy of our Constitution. I now request Professor Shri Kishan More Sir to please give us a brief introduction about today's event.
Of this function, Honorable Deshpande Sir, the Chief Speaker and guest of this function, Honorable Deswal Sir, respected Principal Dr. Rao Sir, the dignitaries and student friends. The Constitution of India has been described as a charter of social revolution by Granville Austin. Now we have completed 64 years to our Constitution, and there are two important parts are enshrined under our Constitution, that are the fundamental right, part 3, and part 4 is the directive principle of state policies. The Fundamental Right Committee, constituted under the Constituent Assembly, have no such basic difference in between the fundamental right and the directive principle. The committee had proposed for the fundamental right. However, we have bifurcated the concept and we have made two parts. That part 3 giving you the fundamental right and part 4 is directive principle of the state policy. For Honorable First Prime Minister of India, Pandit Nehru, part 4 plays with great significance in the social revolution. And when there will be the contradiction in between the fundamental right and the directive principle, according to him, directive principle shall prevail over the fundamental right. However, the different stand has been taken by the judiciary. Our laid down the present principle is that when there is any such contradiction, the fundamental right shall prevail over the directive principle of the state policy. The fundamental right and directive principle are such two concepts which are very significant under the Constitution. The directive principles are beacon for the judiciary, for giving the judgment. The directive principles, according to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, are the scale of measurement of the performance of the government, how government got success in the implementation of the Constitution of India. Part third, basically never it is spoken that we have the fundamental right except there is a title. However, under 37, it is clearly mentioned that the directive principles of the state policy are the fundamental in the governance. Whenever there is the question of legislation will come, government has to take the cognizance of the directive principles of the state policy. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar have given a alert in the Constituent Assembly in his 25th November speech. He said that on 26 January 1950 we are going to introduce in a life of contradiction. In the political aspect we will be having equality. In social and economic life we will be having inequalities. Now considering this different kind of the significance to the fundamental right and the directive principle of the state policy, there are a number of questions in my mind. Considering the jurisprudential aspect of the directive principles and the fundamental right, that basically why there is a requirement of the right to the citizens, why there is a requirement of the fundamental right to the citizen of a modern state, and we have the fundamental right as well as the directive principle of the state policy, and how the directive principle and the fundamental right are going to serve our purpose as we have solemnly resolved to secure justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. In these 64 years, what kind of performance we have given for implementation of the fundamental right and the directive principle of state policy and for bringing our dream in reality. With this, again there is this basic question with me that can there be a bifurcation of justiciable and non-justiciable rights which are guaranteed under the Constitution? How directive principle of state policy are significant for bringing that kind of democracy as it was expected by our founding father of the Constitution, that one man, one vote, one value. And as they were dreamed for the political democracy, which will be consisting of the social and economic democracy, then how there will be the socio-economic and political revolution with the help of this directive principle of state policy. What will be the future of our dream of justice, liberty, equality and fraternity, and how we are responsive to the alert given by Dr. Ambedkar that on 26 January we are going to enter into a life of contradiction, and how long we are going to continue this life of contradiction, what kind of response we have given to this all thing. I hope that the respected speaker of this August gathering is going to guide us on the comparative study of the directive principle and the fundamental rights which are guaranteed under the Constitution of India. With this, I am thankful to the organizer and the audience for giving this opportunity for me to express my views and introduce the topic before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now earnestly request the legal luminary, Professor Dr. Paramjit Jaswal, sir, to deliver his lecture on constitutional law.
Honorable the President of the Management, other members of the MP Law College Management, Dr. C.M. Rao, the Principal, the faculty members, and very dear students. At the very outset, I must thank all of you for providing me this opportunity to be with you. I think within the short span of 1.5 years. I was here about a year and a half back, and once again I'm amongst you to deliver this lecture. I'm equally thankful to the honorable member who introduced the lecture of today. In fact, what I had thought of speaking, he has already summed up before I have started my speech. But in the end of his introductory remarks, he has raised fundamental issues which are very basic and which are confronting not only the minds of individuals, but all the three organs of the state. I'll do my best to answer those basic issues which which have in fact entered into the so-called boxing ring, punching and gnashing each other. When we talk about the two parts, Part 3 and Part 4 of the Constitution. Well, in order to have a systematic views on this topic, I am going to divide my lecture into three parts. The first part, in the first part, I will deliberate upon the evolution of the directive principles, though it has been mentioned that initially there was no difference, but I'll tell you how the differentiation came between Part 3 and Part 4. In the second part, I will dwell upon the actual nature of the directive principles, and the third part I will come to those issues that is the confrontational attitude sometime which is in the minds of the judges and where we are heading for and what is the future of these directive principles. If there are any questions, if you would like to ask me, I think it would be appropriate if I finish up my lecture. Thereafter you can shoot any number of questions to me. I will welcome all those questions as well. Well, I'm sorry I have not made any PowerPoint presentation, but I'll try to make a powerful presentation. When we talk about the directive principle, I think since the introduction is so nicely given, I can presume that you know the basic nature of the directive principle. First thing, there is no limit from where we can start, but I think we should have a reasonable period of a history to know how the development has taken place. It was during the British period that the country was economically exploited, and the people of this country, the great nation, they were deprived of their social and economic rights. It was particularly in the 19th century when the freedom struggle started, people demanded from the Britishers not only the political freedom but also the social and economic rights. Since the French Revolution, there was a growing awareness of the close link which existed between the political freedom and the social justice, which is the signature tune of our Constitution, so very well reflected in the very preambular promise itself. If we study the annals of history, if we go back prior to, even to the British regime, we can find the traces of the social and economic rights, the responsibility of the king to ensure social and economic justice to the people. And I refer here to Kautilya's Arthashastra, where we find a categorical classification of the rights into civil rights, economic rights, and the legal rights. I quote, it is provided in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, king shall provide the orphan, the dying, the infirm, the afflicted, the helpless with maintenance. He shall also provide sustenance to the helpless expectant mothers and also to the children they give birth to. So eloquently mentioned the social responsibility of the king to the people of his kingdom. When we talk about the fundamental rights and the directive principles, some people may say they are the product of Mr. A or Mr. B. I do not want to name anybody. I am of the considered view they are not the brainchild of any single individual. In fact, fundamental rights and directive principles, they are the product of the history. The purpose of the directive principles is to fix certain goals, social and economic, by bringing non-violent social revolution. Grenville Austin, in his celebrated book, which was published immediately after the independence, Cornerstone of a Nation, Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation, I think very eloquently explained the true nature of the directive principle. He said, the core of commitment of the social revolution lies in Part 3 and Part 4 of the Constitution. The directive principles of state policy epitomize the ideas, the aspirations, the sentiments, the precepts, and the goals of our entire freedom movement. And that is why I said directive principles and fundamental rights are not the gift of one individual, they are the product of history and the freedom struggle. Austin further elaborated in his book, and so eloquently he said that directive principles were incorporated in the Constitution with the hope and aspiration that someday the tree of true liberty will bloom in India. When he was talking about true liberty, he was not talking about the political rights and the political freedom, because the political freedom has no meaning unless we have social and economic freedom also. He said, fundamental rights and directive principles connect India's future, present, past. They aim at making India and Indian masses free from the hunger in the positive sense. It was in the year 1885 when Indian National Congress was founded, and some kind of organized demand for the political freedom in this country from the hands of Britishers that started. The first explicit demand for fundamental rights appeared in the Constitution of India Bill, which was presented in 1895 by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. It contained, if you see this bill of 1895, it contained both the rights and the directives. Rights were in the form of, the most important right which was demanded by Lokmanya Tilak was the freedom of speech, which was curtailed by the Britishers during their Raj. As for the directives are concerned, you will be astonished to say that even in the end of the 19th century, the Lokmanya in his bill also incorporated the directive of free and compulsory education, because Lokmanya Tilak believed that the future of the nation is in the younger generation. If the young generation is educated, if they understand the basic rights and the duties, then only the nation can progress in the future. Then came the Commonwealth of India Bill of 1925 by N. Besant as a home rule, and it also contained the rights and directives. I'll just cut short because I will not go in detail into the history. The Nehru Committee, Nehru was one of the freedom fighters in the forefront. Nehru Committee report of 1928 contained the fundamental rights as well as the socio-economic rights, because the directive of free and compulsory education, living wages to the worker, and protection of motherhood was specifically in his committee report. It was the historic resolution of 1929 for Purna Swarajya, which was followed by 3 round table conferences and the famous Karachi resolution of 1931, where it was specifically stated that political freedom must include the economic freedom as well. When you're talking about the political freedom, the reference is naturally to the fundamental rights. When you're talking about the economic freedom, the social freedom, the reference is to the present directive principle as contained in Part 4 of the Constitution. It was in 1945 when Sapro Committee recommended 2 sets of fundamental rights, and please take note of it, how the bifurcation started actually from 1945 onwards. In the Sapro Committee recommendations, it was mentioned that we should have 2 sets of rights. The one set will be called as justiciable rights and other set will be called non-justiciable rights. Though both these categories, they were under the heading of fundamental rights. The reason for categorization of justiciable and non-justiciable, I'll try to elaborate the difference between the two words subsequently, was that the freedom fighters, they wanted that some rights we cannot postpone to the future. The citizens of India, the people of India must have those rights immediately after the attainment of independence, like right to life. Could it be postponed to the future? Not at all. And if somebody is deprived of his right to life, he should have the right to go to the court and get the remedy done. And that is such kind of right, they were called the justiciable rights. At the same time, they were also convinced that there are certain other categories of rights which are equally important and essential. I have mentioned to you one, free and compulsory education, other socio-economic rights. Can a person who is on the street hungry think of his right to life? He has no social and economic freedom. Not possible. But it was not possible because to make them justiciable, because we were already economically so exploited. Ultimately, as the anchor girl, she mentioned the historic resolution, objective resolution, which was introduced on 13th of December 1946 by Nehru in the Constituent Assembly, contained 8 clauses which summarizes the whole Constitution of India. In a way, the whole Constitution was developed on the basis of those 8 clauses of the objective resolution. And if you see 4 of the 8 clauses, clause 1, clause 5, clause 6 and clause 8, they refer to nothing but socio-economic rights. We are indeed lucky. We had very eminent people in the Constituent Assembly. We cannot say some were very intelligent, some were not. All were very intelligent, all made wonderful contribution. But when we talk about the Constitution in particular, the contribution made by Dr. Ambedkar and Dr. B.N. Rao cannot be forgotten. B.N. Rao, who was the constitutional advisor in the Assembly, he was given the responsibility to make the draft, and Dr. Ambedkar, as you know, he was heading the drafting committee as such. Dr. B.N. Rao, in his draft, made 2 sets, or the 2 parts initially under the one heading, one called fundamental rights as enforceable rights, and fundamental principles. There was no reference as a directive principles. Both were fundamental. One is fundamental rights and other were fundamental principles. This draft, when it came before the drafting committee, number of changes were made by the drafting committee. I'll come to that a little later. But when Dr. B.N. Rao suggested fundamental principles and fundamental rights, he was one person who traveled throughout the world, compared the constitutions of the world. And we find this kind of a distinction not only in India, but in other constitutions of the world, like USSR, Germany, and Ireland. The framer of the Constitution, in fact, wanted to make the Indian people free in the positive sense. And when this draft of B.N. Rao came before the subcommittee on fundamental rights, they never wanted, I underline and emphasize once again, they never wanted the non-justiciable rights as the mere directives, as they are considered by many of us today. Therefore, in order to ensure that in future, when the actual constitution comes into operation, these non-enforceable rights should not be treated